What is going on, y'all? This is your boy Saint Irving. Coyote Stark was just announced, and ironically, he's the espada that can split his soul into many pieces. And he seems to have a lot of people divided for a few reasons. So, let's take a look. Coyote Stark is a character with high offensive capabilities in exchange for the constraints imposed by his unique rules. A major feature is that his fighting style changes completely between normal and awakened states. Normally, he consumes spiritual power with any attack other than a quick attack, and if he lacks spiritual power, he leaves himself open to large gaps. In order to make use of his powerful long-range attacks, it is important to accumulate spiritual power using his unique techniques. By awakening, he becomes a close-range type, and his fighting style changes to one that involves managing his blue flame wolf. Because he fights at the expense of his own soul, there is a risk of self-destruction if he is not controlled, but the annihilation power of the blue flame wolf makes it possible to bring the battle to a short-term, decisive battle. When we look at his stats, we see that he is a 2-star ease of use. His stats show that he has a 3 in attack, a 3 in speed, a 5 in range, a 1 in durability, and a 3 in technique. He is not going to be an easy to use character because ultimately he can bring himself to his own downfall if he's not careful, splitting his soul up too much. Very similar to his lore. And when we look at his signature technique, Spiritual Power Load, while holding down the button, you aim the gun and accumulate spiritual power. This will help you accumulate your spiritual power gauge. In your first state, or your first stage, it is essentially your base. Stark will consume spiritual power with his dash attack, flash attack, and special flash attack. So it is important to frequently use this technique to secure spiritual power. With your spiritual pressure technique 1, multi-loaded void flash. It is a multi-loaded Zero in other sense. And he instantly steps back and fires a Zero with his pistol. The number of Zeros released depends on the amount of spiritual power. It increases according to the user's spiritual power, and the damage it deals increases. So the more spiritual power you have, the more Zeros you unleash at that moment. That seems to be the only spiritual pressure technique attack that you have during your base state, because your spiritual pressure technique 2, we are 2 and 1, when activated, spiritual power gradually decreases until spiritual power reaches 0. Step attacks, flash attacks, and special flash attacks will not consume spiritual power. So you'll be able to kind of meter manage this between the signature move and your spiritual pressure technique 2 to be able to deal some strong damage. One thing is that with any attack that you use, you'll have to consider how much spiritual power you have. It seems that the bio is telling us that you might be able to use an attack, but it will come at the cost of opening yourself up to large gaps. It doesn't seem like your attacks will fail if you don't have spiritual power, but they may be more delayed, for example. With your awakening, Sword Release Wolfpack, by releasing the Sword Liberation, or Resurrection really, and releasing Wolfpack, the abilities are enhanced. Unlike the initial stage where it is mainly long range, after awakening it changes into a close range approach. It becomes possible to perform powerful attacks by using the blue flame wolves that are stocked in exchange for the user's soul. What I'm hypothesizing is that blue flame wolf stock is accumulated by changing your signature move into a blue flame wolf stock. Now, it says that Stark's special rule is added after awakening. You can stock up on blue flame wolves in exchange for your soul. If you have a blue flame wolves stock, some of your actions will change, and you can use the stock to launch a powerful attack. It seems from the bio it is telling us that this is going to change the game because is a very powerful technique. In the manga and in the show, it was more so like an explosion, and it was coming at the cost of ripping out pieces of his soul and turning them into wolves. When we look at everything as a whole, essentially he's going to be meter managing his spiritual power gauge. He doesn't seem to have any additional state or gauge, but what he does have is that there's a difference between his base state and his awaken. In his base state, he'll be a zoner, and he'll have to use his spiritual power load to accumulate spiritual power. Now, to my understanding, there is a regular quick attack that you can use to just accumulate spiritual power as well. And it's noted that your dash attack, flash attack, and special flash attack, which is your long range heavy, all consume spiritual power. If you can use your signature move for some time, you'll accumulate enough spiritual pressure or power, and then you'll be able to use spiritual pressure technique 2, and where your meter will slowly go down, but during that time, you can be a menace and unleash an enormous amount of attacks in a quick amount of time. That's going to be what you're going to want to use as soon as you can, but if not, you can at least use the multi-loaded settle, where you'll immediately step back, gives you a moment, not necessarily a counter, but allows you to get a breath in and unleash some settles depending on how much you have. So this does seem that although it will increase in damage, you'll also be unloading your entire spiritual pressure. So then you'll need to use signature move right afterwards to get more spiritual power. The good news is that they may not immediately attack you since you've just unleashed a bunch of attacks, and they may need to regroup. So you'll need to understand how you're moving in the game and how you're managing these meters. Are you having a moment to use your spiritual pressure technique 2 to where you can go all out, or do you need to use your signature move to charge up? Do you need to attack a little bit to get your spiritual power if the enemy is not giving you a chance to reload, in a sense? Now, what to consider is that when you go into your awakening, you're now more of a melee, close combat type character, and some of your actions are going to change. What I'm hypothesizing is that your signature move is going to change into where, let's say it is a blue flame wolf stock accumulation, for example. And when you do that, your key cone is then removed and you have a certain number of stocks. It could be just one, it could be a few. Likely, I would imagine it's likely a few. And then once you use it up, you have to use another signature move to be able to get the stock back. Because it does say blue flame wolves, I would imagine it's likely more than one wolf. Also, it's wolf pack, it's not just a wolf. So what I'm thinking is that you get a few wolves per stock. So for each key cone that you use, or a piece of your soul, you get a few wolves. And then once you've unleashed them, you have to get another stock. But the good thing is that because the wolves themselves do a lot of damage, you may not have to take too much of your soul. So what's going to happen here is that you're going to have to manage how much of your soul can you risk, because if you have a really strong opponent, you may not want to. You may just want to do some melee attacks and keep it, at a distance. The big question here is if the self-imposing rule about your spiritual power being used up by your dash attack, your flash attack, and your special flash attack, if that's just in your first stage, because this signature move seems to imply it's just in your first stage, and where in your second stage, you then use your kompaku to reload your power. One big question I do happen to have that doesn't seem to be answered through this is that, is your consumption of spiritual power for your dash attack, your flash attack, and your special flash attack, if it's just in your base state? It says in your signature move that the first stage consumes spiritual power with your dash attack, flash attack, and special flash attack. But is that implying that in your second stage or your awakening that you're not consuming spiritual power? Because I feel like that would just waste your spiritual pressure technique 2, unless you still do consume spiritual power, and so therefore your signature pressure technique 2 would still have some usage to it. Also, something to question, your spiritual pressure technique 1 is a settle released from a pistol. If you're awakened, you no longer have your pistols, so it stands to reason that your spiritual pressure technique 1 is likely going to change to something else. And with that, that also might mean that your spiritual pressure technique 2 might change to something else as well. So there's a lot to consider here that is not being shown. And this wouldn't be the first time they don't show all the spiritual pressure techniques, because if you look at Rukia, it is explained that her power changes, but it doesn't necessarily show us or explain just how it does. It shows us in the battle and we get to see that, but there's not too much of an explanation here in the battle data that we get. So it's very reasonable to think that we may not be seeing everything even now. It seems to imply that the way that things are listed here. We've yet to know if your signature move is what changes. It seems like it would be because you no longer have pistols, given that you now have swords. However, it's not necessarily saying that explicitly, so we can only assume for now. It's my assumption that you only lose 1 soul as you use your stocks, but who knows, it could be 2. Some are even speculating that he may have more stocks to adjust for the fact that he takes away his own soul, but that could just be the gamble in the fact that you have as many souls as everybody else, and you have to be just a little bit better to make sure that you don't die at the cost of killing them with your own soul. And I think that's a fairly lore accurate situation. When we look at his lore, Stark has always been envious of the weak because they can at least stay in a pack, whereas him, whenever he was just standing near someone that wasn't strong enough, he would disintegrate their soul and kill them. So much so when I believe he was found, or often just when he was hanging out, he'd be sitting near a pile of corpse because the Hollows just could not stand to even exist in his presence. He was one of the strongest even before Aizen met him, and as the Primera Espada, he's always been the strongest but doesn't seek to be the leader. He's just more so a wolf that wants to fit in with the pack. And so in his loneliness, because Stark does represent the symbolism of solitude in death and how you die alone, he wanted to be with someone so badly, hated his loneliness so badly, that he split his soul in 2 so he wouldn't have to be alone, and would also be able to exist with someone who could live near him. And I think that's so poetic of Kubo. So Stark is definitely one of my favorite characters, as he's very interesting in his lore and just his philosophy in living. And I think this translates very well into how he was made. He's always been someone that can rip away his soul in exchange for power or just company. And so Tamsoff is using that lore to explain how he is basically fighting. He is in fact risking it all when he's in his awakening. And I know some people were a little bit upset about the fact that he could have possibly had a reawakening, but I think when we look at it, it's just a matter of there are almost no characters that have an awakening. When we look at all the characters that we have, a reawakening is very rare, I should say. And so an awakening, sure, yes, everybody does have one, but a reawakening seems to have been left for those that risked their lives at the very end. And yes, we can make the argument that yes, everyone's risked their life as they unleash their Zanpakuto, their Bankai, etc., or their Resurrection. But still, what I'm saying here is look at the cases that we have. We have Aizen, who evolved at the state of death. We have Uryu, who was literally dying, already poisoned, couldn't move, and was already using Ranzo Tengai to survive the match against Mayuri. And what did he do? He activated a forbidden technique that would have left him without any spiritual power. Again, that is at the brink of defeat. And then we have Ichigo, who died and has to actually die in order to get this reawakening to occur. Again, these are extreme cases. Coyote Stark getting serious isn't necessarily the same equivalent. Now, yes, you could absolutely make the argument that when he releases Los Lobos, yes, he technically kind of is going all out. But this just kind of fits, really, I would say. His base would have been interesting, but it would have been a few different settles. And really the one he does the most is the, point blank settle with no stance. But that can't be the only technique that he does. So I do think that overall, I'm okay. I understand that if you're not, that's fine. I'm going to probably play him though. So good luck to you. He very much is a pretty balanced character. His overall stat is a 3, so he's not too strong. If anything, he is a risk. He is a gamble because you have to know how to play. And you really can't take too much damage because your durability is not going to allow that. The good thing is that because he can zone, he's got some good situational things he can do here because he's fast, or at least average, you could say. He's also got some good attacks, and his techniques are very peculiar, so you'll be able to do a lot depending on if you have the skill set for it. Overall, he's a very good mix-up. He's got some good base situations going on. He's got some good awakening going on there, and so it's really going to be, no matter what state you're in, you're managing either your stocks, your soul stocks, your kompaku, or you're going to be managing your spiritual power. It seems also that in your awakening state, you might also have to manage your spiritual power, but that's yet to be determined. It doesn't seem to illustrate it as best as we would like. One thing I would like to comment on is, because I know a few people were crashing out on Reddit, and just to address that, I do see that when we look at the Shinji trailer, you can actually tell that Soifun has one arm, right? Now, we could say that this is story mode, sure. I would at least say that it's without a doubt that he's in story mode, but I don't see any reason why Barragan shouldn't be in this. If anything, for me, if they didn't do the obvious that they could have done, with this a 3-2-1, which is, Tier Hollybell, then Barragan, and then Stark, this tells me that they're opening up the gates to be able to show more characters, or another character, or what have you. I don't see why they would pick Barragan to be after Stark unless they're following it up with something crazy, But you guys let me know what you guys think in the comments about this breakdown, Coyote Stark, and the future of Bleach in the next few weeks. We've only got less than 5 weeks left, y'all, and so we're right there. One more month, or less than a month, really, and we'll be playing Bleach in our hands. This has been your boy Saint Irving. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.